think we can wait another 5 minutes to start. It's 5 o'clock now.
Good. You've been. It's like the first time we had more than like 2 words with you.
I know. Usually I see it in 5 seconds in the cafeteria.
I know. You was done.
Yes and no.
Okay. It's great.
Yeah, I mean, I'm chief, so that's nice. And I had the fellowship for a year,
Nice.
but it's like not the same at all.
Yeah, yeah,
Pretty much, I guess.
yeah. Very cool.
Amazing that you're already at that point. It just seems like you just graduated, right? I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does. It's been a long 5 years. It's happened.
For me to say.
Also, I've had 2 kids in the last 5 years, so, or my wife did. So it's been a long number of
The time accelerator or time decelerator? I feel
it lengthens. It's, you know, the good things make it go faster than an overall haven't slept probably in 5 years. Rent residency plus kids.
Yeah.
Plus PhD, were you PhDing at the same time?
No. I got it. I was done.
Yeah, no, they're doing well, wrapping stuff up and
You in the last year or what?
yeah, last year and then I've got fellowship and then back to the city, possibly Sinai, so.
Okay.
John or Todd, can you just unmute?
Yeah, because,
Okay.
yeah, so be there.
I can hear you.
Okay,
Just
perfect.
one,
I'm in.
just 1 year
Thank
there,
you.
that's it.
Somebody did a. I guess it was resident. She did something. I don't know, it was in Penny.
Okay.
And he came back.
Yeah.
and discussed it.
Yeah.
That's nice.
It's a good household.
Yeah, no, it's been good. I'm excited. A little change of pace.
Mhm. Yeah.
New York
But you
has
can
sucked me in, so.
Yeah.
You know.
Are you going to use the board, Janice?
Oh, I might.
If it can be seen in the camera, I'm not sure it can.
What do you
But
think?
I can even write on it and then just take a picture and
Here,
send it to
here,
you.
here.
Hey.
Yes, that's what
Nice.
Here.
Yeah, of course.
Side of my- It is expensive.
Oh, yeah.
You think we should?
I don't have kids, so.
Oh, so it looks like maybe some people.
Yeah, there's about 5 people on now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think only 12
Yeah,
RSVP, and usually we only get half of who RSVP'd anyway, so.
Which sounds like.
Whenever you're
Reduce
ready.
it. Great.
Want to give it a couple
I'll
more
give it a
minutes?
couple of minutes.
Your jacket is-
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay.
Busy? Yeah.
Yeah.
The line is very sort of intense rotation where I'm chief of the rhinology sort of service as well as all of the consults. So I'm like constantly doing double duty. And 3 more days
Do
of
you
it.
get to see your family?
Wait.
Weekends?
You said a beat.
Oh, this is a rough one. This is a rough. Most months are not like this. I think it's a pretty good year overall. This is one of the
That was
tough blocks. Yeah, it's like operating.
Oh, I just like, I
Every day
usually
till
just
about,
see, I
like,
feel like the qualitative,
I'd say like
like
9.
yes, no. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
We just get like a, but go. So you can like sort of tighten it
But,
down.
Well, you
Uh,
need to do the cycle threshold.
I like it. So.
As
Yeah.
long as you're-
Essentially sort of like
So
a
it-
level of like.
It's
Sure.
like the
It's environment.
Yeah, I see. Everyone was sick over the last 2 weeks, except for me, because I wasn't.
There you go.
But I was only home like when everyone was kind of like at the tail end, so it was only on the weekends, or like on the tail end, but I still had to take care of the kids. My wife was just like not. So it's been a constant.
Right.
I guess that's the only upside, is I just don't get any of the pediatric illnesses.
Got it.
I miss them all.
So he was super infectious. So, but who made the idea of chest wave? No, yeah. Sorry, very excited. Yeah, you just sort of like were thinking outside the box.
Well, I don't know, it's just my infection.
Yeah.
Mike Lightman is
Yeah.
supposed to come. Maybe we can go ahead and get started.
Yeah, he did say that there's a chance that he would get Autumn,
He would be
but-
late.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can just, should I look at the camera?
So this is everything we can see. so-
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everybody to our second session of the new physician scientist career development series. Today we're going to be talking about mentoring, but before we get into the session, maybe we could have the next slide after this. Oh, yes. So we sent around a needs assessment survey last time with a list of different potential topics, and the topics that seemed to be of greatest interest were mentoring, which we'll talk about today, getting funded, time management, publishing, obtaining a faculty position, that could also include negotiating, and then a series of meetings that we'll arrange with physician scientists from Mount Sinai or other places to talk about their career path, how they made their decisions and what went well and what they would do differently. What we didn't get from respondents were other suggestions for future sessions. So we will be sending out another survey just to get specific suggestions. And then the next slide, I'd like to introduce our 5 panelists for today. Erin Beck over there is a new assistant professor of neurology. Matt Hernandez over here is a graduate of our MD PhD program. He's in his 3rd year in the pathology residency and he's chief resident. Ben Laitman is another graduate of our MD PhD program. He's in his 5th year of the ENT residency and he is also chief resident. Mina Risk, who is in his 2nd year in psychiatry in the physician scientist research track. And then finally, Rachel Solnick, who's a new assistant professor in emergency medicine and population health. So with that, I'd like to introduce Dr. Janice Gabrilove, who will oversee today's session on mentoring and being mentored. So thank you, Janice.
Thank you. So I was asked today to really focus on finding a research mentor. And part of that conversation will focus on what is mentoring and what's our knowledge about best practices in mentoring. There's a wealth of information about mentorship and mentor training, and there's actually a whole science of mentoring. There is a website I was just mentioning to Margaret called the Early Stage Investigator website on Sinai. You can Google it. I will provide the link to Margaret. And on there's a lot of resources and information about mentoring that may be useful for you either now or in the future. So in our brief time together, I'm hoping that we can that at the end of this, you'll be able to define the role of a mentor, specifically understanding a little bit of the difference between mentor, coach, and sponsor. Identify characteristics of an effective mentor, and the converse is those characteristics that are perhaps not ideal in the mentoring practice. Delineate best practices for identifying and selecting a mentor. Not every mentor is the right one for you. It's a partnership. You need to really have some self-awareness. We'll talk about that. Expand your mentorship horizons through exposure to the experiences of others, our esteemed panel, as well as from one another, those online, those in person, and accelerate the process of becoming an effective mentee. There's a lot written about mentorship and mentoring and mentor training and its impact, but there's very little written about understanding the perspective of what it takes to be an effective mentee. So it is a 2-person process or sometimes more than that. So let's just brainstorm for a moment about how we define a mentor. And maybe I'm going to write this on a board and I can take a photo of it at the end and send it around. So just from the group here, or those of you online, what comes to mind when you think of a mentor?
A pathfinder.
Pathfinder. Great. Others?
A leader.
Advocate.
Great words.
Role model.
Guide. A guide.
A guide,
Dr. Malone put a supporter in the chat,
Dr. Malone put
a supporter.
a supporter.
Teacher.
Great. Any other thoughts from the group online, or putting your thoughts on the chat?
Someone more experienced than me, Sarah said.
Very good. Someone more experienced. I am a terrible speller, so. Good. Those are all great ideas and really capture the essence of a mentor. So let's look at what we know about mentors. Mentors are people with career experiences willing to share knowledge, provide emotional and moral encouragement, give constructive feedback on performance, encourage and help to create opportunities, and serve as many of the comments you mentioned, a role model, advisor, counselor, guide, supporter, tutor, and advocate. So you see, you know all this already. So should we end? No, we'll keep going. And so this is taken from the Council of Graduate Schools publication, really describing some of the key operatives of a mentor. Let's take a moment just to talk about mentor versus coach versus sponsor. So I like to think of mentor as really a more holistic role. It's an experienced individual, and this gets to the comment that someone made, some more experienced than me. An experienced individual who imparts knowledge, shares valuable experiences, and provides advice, moral support, and access to others to advance the professional growth and career development over time of a less experienced individual. So again, that mentoring role is very holistic and incorporates the roles of coach and sponsor with the many facets of the mentor's role. When we think about coach, it's an individual who provides personal or professional goal-focused training to achieve a specified skill set. And certainly a mentor may be doing that, but they do so much more. A sponsor is often an individual who advocates for you to others, but may not have any role in actually enabling you to advance per se. And so sometimes your mentor is going to function as a sponsor, but it's when you're thinking about looking for a mentor, you really want to look at these other attributes. And sometimes a coach, a sponsor is equated with mentoring, but I think this helps one realize that it's really much more than that. So what are some of the qualities of an effective mentor? Let's hear from the group. And this gets a little bit to arming you and enabling you to think about how to select for a mentor. So what do you think are some of the qualities of an effective mentor? Or if you prefer to sometimes look at the glass half empty, some of the qualities you want to avoid.
They're good listeners.
Good listeners.
We have
Right.
some comments in the chat. Networking, responsive and available.
So excellent. Good listener. Responsive. Available. I heard somebody else shout out something.
Aware of the mentee's strengths and weaknesses.
Desire to mentor.
Time. Time. A big one.
Relevant expertise.
Relevant expertise. Again, all of these attributes need to be put into the balance, right? You can have a terrific person that may serve as a mentor, but not your primary mentor. We're going to come to that matrix mentoring model. But clearly, in addition to these other attributes, they have to have the relevant expertise in order to bring you from less knowledgeable to more knowledgeable. They have to have that added expertise, relevant expertise. Anything else? Anybody online?
John mentioned willingness to let the mentee fail on the way to success.
Willingness for failure. Great. Terrific. So let's look at what some of the literature says. Again, you're all on point. These are best characteristics of effective mentors taken from Medical Teacher from 2006 by Romani et al. And these are some of the characteristics: imparting confidence and trust, ability to create an environment conducive to achieving excellence, open to other ways of thinking and doing. I think that came up in our little brainstorming exercise. Being an active listener came up before. Advocacy helps to advance problem-solving capacity and readiness. Knowledgeable of the mentee's capabilities and potential, which gets to strengths, another way of framing strengths and weaknesses, which I kind of like, right? Capabilities and potential. It's a positive spin. A caring attitude, empathetic, building confidence, maintenance of high ethical and scientific standards, and individualized strategies based on value set and needs of the mentee. I'll just show you, I ran, so based on the mentor training program called Entering Mentoring that was initially formulated by Joe Handelsman, a renowned molecular biologist who runs the Drug Discovery Institute at University of Wisconsin. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I ran a session with the graduate school faculty, actually two of them, one asynchronous online and then another that was in person just right before the pandemic. And these were the characteristics of an effective mentor that the graduate school faculty identified to show that we really are a community of practice of mentors. Some are better than others, some have more skills than others, but mentoring is really an evolving, iterative, quality improvement approach. We can all be better mentors. Even the best mentors can be even better. And that's true in everything that you're doing in your current roles as well. And so they identified clear communication of expectations, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Investment in each individual, not just favorites. Approachable and accessible, one that you all identified. Access to state-of-the-art materials and resources that gets to that relevant expertise. Encouraging, pushing for creativity and critical thinking. Open to mentee feedback, so a two-way conversation. Providing opportunities to network, that came up with as one, and so forth. So collectively, we have a wealth of insight into this that really reinforces and amplifies what the literature really tells us, what the evidence-based literature tells us. So what do mentors do? You may want to trim down your CV a tad, provide exposure and access. Share understanding of organizational values, relationships, and some of the unwritten rules. Identify needed skills and opportunities for growth. Assist with setting appropriate milestones and goals. Provide and receive feedback. Create that safe learning environment, which can't be emphasized enough. And foster accountability. Finally, encourage self-reflection, because as I mentioned, this is a partnership. And as you go down this pathway, you are a major participant in this process, an active participant in this process. And self-reflection will take you a long way. And I'll share a little bit about what's known in that regard. So from the Joe Handelsman Entering Mentoring training program, which we use here and is being used across the country to really encourage evidence-based mentoring practices, that program really identified 6 core competencies. And the most important of which, and which relate to the last 3 are equally important, but they are also directly related to the first 3, and that is aligning expectations, assessing understanding, and maintaining effective communication. And I'm raising this in the context of your going about finding a mentor by letting you think about what it is you want to look for. And some of the questions you're going to ask are going to relate to the capacity of the mentor to exhibit these capabilities and competencies. And then when you train to be mentors and you already in your residencies, you're mentoring medical students, in your fellowships, you're mentoring residents, as faculty, you're mentoring others, on and on. And so it's never too early to start to think about this. You're both a mentee and a mentor in the research enterprise and healthcare enterprise. So let's just switch gears a little bit and talk about best practices for finding a mentor. So the first is to know your goals to inform the ask. You really need to think proactively about what is it that you want to get out of this relationship? Where is it you want to go? That doesn't mean you may travel the road and come to a fork in the road and realize you have a whole new series of decisions to make. But at the get-go, you need to have an idea of what road you're going down and what is the ask. As opposed to going to somebody and saying, tell me what you can do for me. That is not going to work as well and not get you in the habit of being in charge in part of your own destiny. Identify your mentoring needs. What's important to you? We'll come back to this in a moment. Be proactive and prepare. Do the research beforehand. Talk to others. Leverage your networks. Speak with people you know who may know individuals that you're considering to take you under their wing. And assess your own personal values. Consider people you admire and who you look up to, and evaluate what matters to you most. All of these are good exercises and are recommended in the literature broadly about best practices for finding a mentor. Other best practices include assess for fit. So you want to evaluate an individual's communication style, their work ethic, the prior track record as a mentor and what the progress of other prior trainees has been, the work environment, the culture and the tone. Some people really need a much more hands-on approach from a mentor, and others need to work much more independently. We call this, if it's a good mentor, they're going to practice what we call situational leadership, which is knowing where you're at and what stage of development you're at as to whether you need more hand-holding or you need the ability to kind of fly on your own with somebody hovering in the distance. You need to evaluate for that when you think about finding a mentor. And prepare an elevator pitch, a few liners that explain your interest and provide a potential mentor with information. Again, those expectations. It's never too early to try to align expectations, to have some clarity of what you expect if you were to come on board. The time commitment, the goals, this is information that a mentor needs to be able to decide whether they can meet you halfway and they will be able to be successful and in enabling you to be successful. So that really helps to align those expectations from the start. the lack of alignment is a major reason for, and the lack of communication, which relates to that lack of alignment, is a major reason why mentoring relationships don't work out. So another point before we get to our panel, and I'm going to ask them some questions, is this notion of a matrixed mentorship model. And this is from Binghamton and colleagues, published in Academic Medicine. You will, if you're pursuing research, likely to have a primary research mentor. More and more, we often suggest that there's a complementary mentor in many of the programs that I run out of the Clinical Research Education Program and under the CTSA. If you have a basic science mentor, we often suggest a complementary clinical mentor who may have better insight into the clinical phenotype or the scenarios in which that science may apply, not taking anything from the basic science expertise, and vice versa. Somebody in the clinical realm that may be a mentor may not have the methodological expertise in biostatistics to see your science through. So no one research mentor, it may not be a standalone. And it's a good idea to think of this framework that you have your research mentor or mentors, a scientific advisor who is somebody who is often discipline related, who can serve as a sounding board and help you navigate the enterprise, a staff member, somebody in the grants and contracts office or in the IRB who's your go-to person to find out the real deal, nitty gritty, someone in the Office of Research Services who can again help you navigate. Cultivate those mentorships and really think proactively about them. And then near peer mentorship, which is some of what we're doing today by our panelists who are a little further along than some of you who are attending. And then at the center of this is you, self, learning self-management skills, which all of these mentors should be encouraging and advocating for. Because that will enable you, again, to be in that driver's seat. And this is further detailed from a working conceptual framework that we published on recently in the JCTS. Again, self-directed learning, this self-management component, which really propagates self-awareness, project management, your ability to kind of determine your goals, that allows you to have more productive conversations and to enables you to have a much better roadmap in mind in terms of reaching out to mentors. So just to end here, and then we're going to open it up to our panel, some of the mentee best practices that are out there. Keep track and sight of your goals. They may change, but you need to keep track of them. Write them down on paper. Do a little SWOT analysis. What was at the front of the list today may be at the back of the list tomorrow, but really proactively get in the habit of doing this. Meet consistently and often with your mentor. Set an agenda. They may have an agenda as well, but just the fact that you've taken the time to set an agenda will speak volumes of your intentionality and the fact that you're really on point and on task. Be open to feedback and ask for it, positive or constructive. When you meet with your mentor, take some notes and follow up with an action plan to keep your mentor on track. They may be doing it as well, but everyone likes to feel valued. Your mentor is in this in part for the value of watching you grow and develop. And so feeding on that is often helpful. And then practice gratitude. Again, everyone wants to feel valued. You want to feel valued, and mentors should practice this as well. But sometimes we forget that the mentor needs that also. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed panel members. And I'm going to ask them to tell us a little bit about how they went about finding a mentor at a particular stage in their career, what worked and what didn't. And I'm going to start with you, Ben, since you're so alert.
No. Yeah. So I guess just to reintroduce myself. So I'm a 5th year in the ENT program. Currently, since last year, I'm doing next year a fellowship in laryngology, which I'll be staying here, which is specializes in voice, airway, and swallowing. And I was an MD PhD graduate from Mount Sinai. My PhD was in neuroscience, and I completely switched gears for my residency. And so it was kind of starting over in a lot of ways, trying to take a lot of what I learned about research as a whole, but needed kind of a lot of more guidance because I was entering into a new sort of research field. And honestly, my path to finding a mentor, I'd say my mentor right now is probably our chairman, Dr. Janice, who I work closely with on a bunch of research projects. It was sort of an organic, probably started more of as a scientific advisor that turned into a mentorship, which I think is kind of how my path happened. It was we were starting to talk about various research projects, and he has become sort of more of a more global advocate for an advancement of like how I want to structure my career and helping me with sort of all the different things we've discussed here. So I guess my path was sort of to say that I think it doesn't always have to, in my opinion, start as I want this person as a mentor, but sort of I have a relationship with this person in some sort of capacity, maybe scientific in nature, and that over time that relationship might grow into more of a mentorship relationship where they're really starting working towards advancement of your career and so forth.
So I think you bring up an additional excellent point, and that is that the needs for mentoring will change over time. We've described this as setting your goals, that is really a starting point. It's like learning to ride a bicycle. A lot of your approach probably is drawn from your MD PhD experience and in selecting a mentor, and then that becomes ingrained in terms of the strategies that you use. Matt.
All right, so hi everybody, I'm Matt Hernandez. I'm one of the chief residents for pathology. I'm a 3rd year resident, but I'll be graduating this year because I am a clinical pathology only track. So my focus is all laboratory medicine. So I will be doing a fellowship actually in microbiology at EI Deaconess in Boston next year for a year. And then it's looking to come back to the city. So to be determined. But like Benny, I actually did my MD PhD here as well. Not long after, like a year or two, I think. And I kind of have a little bit of a hip hopping around the country. So I've had several kind of moments where I've had to learn how to select mentors. And I think one factor that was really important was also kind of understanding who I am and how I've evolved in my own interests, but also in my goals and how those change and how those different mentors influence that as well. So I'm from very South Texas, a very insular area, very predominantly Mexican American, college in Rhode Island, went out and worked out at the NIH for a year. And I selected that really from a culture fit from having interviewed at multiple NIH labs. And I found that this was actually a really best fit for my own interest in microbiology. And there was definitely a gut instinct, I think, in speaking with the folks there that I knew they were going to cater to me and expose me to technology and research and just a brand new experience that I never would have thought I would have ever have been able to have gotten anywhere, be it the main campus. And then I came to Sinai knowing very well I wanted to do micro. So, I had done my research beforehand. I had seen folks who I think shared similar interests with me. And I found my PI, who was Viviana Simon. And my research was looking at HIV evolution in vivo and pathogen host interactions. And I loved what I did. I, had great skills that I developed for my PhD. I really have to give Viviana a lot of credit because she had such good skills, I think, in positioning me and being very aware of where I was in my needs and my training to get me to that next step and to get me and push me to network and, you know, mature as a physician scientist or upcoming physician scientist. And I decided to stay in pathology because I knew I wanted to go into microbiology. And with that, my interests have evolved. I've really started to go into the realm of utilizing diagnostics from a microbiology lab to inform not only like pathogen evolution at a community basis, but also understanding, you know, what new diagnostic methods we can start to utilize in the lab and how that impacts patient care. And with that, I've, you know, kind of serendipitously found mentors who have very different aspects from each other, you know, and these have come all from all over the world, and now who are Alberto Panis-Mondolfi, who's our director of molecular microbiology, Mia Sordillo, who is our director of systems microbiology, I believe, and they each have facets that some overlap, but they're also so distinct from another that they contribute in ways where Alberto is amazing at putting me in positions for networking and for, you know, helping me evolve in my own like technical understanding and clinical reasoning, whereas Mia is a really, really great clinician and is helping me, you know, really consider that when starting to write papers and, you know, apply for funding and everything. So I think having these opportunities and learning from their own growth and development has really put me in a good position. So yes, but lots of it definitely takes a village. I don't think it's a one mentor thing. It's not API. I think it's a group, and that group changes as your goals change too. So
I think you brought up many good points, but one in particular is the concept of cultivation. That you know, we are part of our training inherently is to be good observers. So observe people around you and cultivate those relationships, and they will evolve to mentoring relationships when the need arises. So I think that's a great principle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rachel Solnick. I am new-ish, started in the past year and a half ago, assistant professor in the emergency departments, as well as a joint appointment with population health. And my interest is in sexually transmitted infections and as well as HIV prevention. And I've thought, like, while you guys have been talking about how it's so good to see that sometimes some of the challenges that you think are just yours are also like other people's. Like I've lamented the fact that the NIH doesn't have, you know, like an institute of like emergency medicine. And that's always been a hard thing for our specialty to really have a really deep like pathways, pipelines into research, is that we're all sort of like all over the place just because we see all sorts of things. And as I've evolved in my research interests, I've been mostly finding more senior mentors who are good at research and not necessarily always like in STS. So it's a very, very slim segment. And so, but there's so much that others who are smart people can contribute just by way of just being smart people who like know the research game, that I've still been able to get a lot out of those relationships. And it's also taught me a bit in terms of like how to mentor up, in terms of like, okay, well, I'm really just gonna like do my own thing, and then hopefully this person's gonna like keep me on track. We're gonna both keep each other on track. I was lucky that when I came here, I actually just serendipitously almost, because this is the place I was going to go anyways, but there's two like major ED HIV researchers and STI people who are also researchers here. And so it's been interesting to see how it's like a different kind of mentorship you get when you're with somebody who's like in your area versus somebody who's adjacent to it. And there's just like the fact that I can work in both situations, I think is a good sign for anybody who's interested in research, that like, if you want it, like you can make it work.
So I think you raise a couple of issues. One is that, I mean, you are very well situated with two departments that are very committed to research emergency medicine and population health. And they're complementary because there are people with methodological expertise and clinical phenotype expertise in emergency medicine. But then you have the methodological gurus kind of in population health that can help you with the statistical framework, database, longitudinal data. And so I think it raises this whole point that it's not just a single person, that you have dual mentorship because of the kinds of questions you're asking that will need those two spheres. And the good news is, especially for those two departments, they work very, very collaboratively. And the people, the leadership in population health sciences is very focused on really bringing that methodological expertise, especially in biostatistics and longitudinal data analysis to that framework. So just for those thinking about going in research, that you often need this complementary team. One person is not going to be all. And sometimes we get into especially in medicine, we are working very closely with somebody who's a fantastic clinician and really is going to help open doors for us. And they have a wealth of knowledge of the clinical phenotype, but may not have the right methodology skills. And so you need to complement that. And I can tell you that it'd be very unusual for anyone to feel badly if you bring a partnership together. That's going to actually be added value for everyone. So that's much more now in this day and age where there's so much more knowledge needed to be brought to bear on a given question, that this kind of teamwork and team science and dual mentorship is very much more the norm. That's Mina.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Mina. I'm a PGY2 in psychiatry on the physician science track. Now, I have a little bit of a different path. I graduated from medical school 13 years ago back in Egypt, and I did a prior neuro and psych residency. And then I came here to the United States 2016 to do some research training in neuroimaging as it relates to suicide research at Columbia. And then I decided to stay. And now I'm doing the residency again to basically get my license. I spent 5 years at Columbia doing neuroimaging research. And during that time, I had two mentors who are both like very senior researchers in suicide. And I wanted to emphasize that they're both totally different personalities. Like one of them was like very on top of things. I would send an email to him, would reply in 5 minutes, or send a paper, would review same day or next day. And the other one would like take 2 months to even look at anything I send, or I have to send like 5 reminders.
Came from you.
I just want to say that I at some point I could find some like middle ground with both of them, and they were both very supportive, but like in different way. One thing that I found very helpful is reviewing with each of them my goals every like 6 months. Even with that mentor who was not like just as responsive, when I gave them like deadline that I need to finish this, or I need to get this done, or I need to apply for this grant, they would work with me better, I would say. Now, when I started preparing my application for residency, I had all of these in my mind. So I did a lot of research. I only applied for research track, and I got invited into like 10 or 12 programs. So in each of these programs, I had like a plan for someone to mentor me in this program based on a lot of research, a lot of asking people who worked with this person before. And I would say I was very fortunate to match here and be working with my current mentor in the same area I'm interested in, who's also very supportive and responsive. But one thing that I find very helpful with mentor is being assertive, and don't be shy to ask all the time.
So you made many important points, but one thing that I failed to say was, don't be afraid to ask for advice, even when you don't think you need it. Sometimes either from imposter syndrome, or you want to demonstrate that you are independent, that you're not a burden on anyone, you're self-sufficient. You forget that somebody actually wants to feel needed. And that can actually, if you don't go out of your way to ask that advice, you may not get as much out of that relationship. Because just as you want to feel needed, so does your mentor. So that's, I think, a very good advice, assertive and ask for advice on a regular basis. Erin.
Yep. Hi, so I'm Erin. I'm relatively new, also assistant professor in neurology. So I started I didn't start, but I did an MD PhD at Columbia. And my PhD was in basic neuroscience. And then I did a neurology residency also at Columbia and decided I wanted to continue to do research, but change kind of areas quite dramatically. And I actually did a 5-year fellowship / postdoc at that NIH doing neuroimaging and multiple sclerosis. And so now that's what I'm doing here. Started my own group, and I'm spending most of my time doing research here in that area. So I think, my primary mentors have for sure been my PIs, both during my postdoc and my PhD. And so they were chosen not necessarily for their mentorship ability, but because the area of their research was something that I wanted to do, right? So I think that, and that comes with, and obviously I wouldn't have joined their labs if I didn't think that they were nice people and that they would be reasonable mentors at least. But, it means that they had some weaknesses, I think, in their mentor, in their skills and their expertise. And so I think what's important is to be aware of that and to not be shy about seeking out other people that can help where your primary mentor may not be able to. So for instance, at the NIH, my mentor didn't write grants because you don't have to do that at the NIH. So when thinking about writing grants, he was not the best person to help with that. So, you have to seek out other people. And I think I just wouldn't be shy about, I think people are flattered when you come to them and ask them for advice, I think, and I think most people are happy to help out more junior people and to give advice. They may be busy. They may say, no, I don't have time, or they may say yes and then not respond to you because they don't have time. But I think it doesn't hurt to ask. I think it flatters people, and you might find someone who's going to give you really good advice and be a good mentor and kind of other aspects that you don't necessarily get from your primary mentor.
Questions from the people online, and yeah.
Thank you. And this has been a great discussion. I was going to ask about the potential conflict between PI being your mentor and having another mentor. There's not always alignment in terms of goals. The PI clearly wants the project done, and it may align with your own personal research development, but it may not. And so do you recommend having the second mentor if your primary mentor is your PI? Because again, career development may be something that, or other things like writing grants may not be something that your PI is necessarily going to be helpful with.
So So we talked a little bit about this, that it is always a good idea to have kind of a primary mentor or mentors based on the goal and the skill set needed to be brought to bear on the questions that you're asking. And I think there's much more receptivity to that complementary mentorship. Again, it depends on the environment. That might be less so in a wet lab based project than certainly in the clinical research realm. Complementary mentoring is important. There's still somebody who serves as primary. I think there has to be the rules of engagement, that aligning expectations. If there are two mentors and the trainee, then that needs to be a group effort, and aligning expectations, what the roadmap looks like, what the contract, I mean, it's not technically a real contract, but how do we go forward, so that everybody's on the same page. And that is actually the utility. We didn't talk about this at all today, but there's something called the Individual Career Development Plan, or the IDP. And that is really the function of the IDP, is really a self-management tool. And to get everybody on the same page, it allows you to think about how you want to spend your time, and then to use that as a framework to discuss your research with your mentors and how things are going to get set up. You may take the first stab at that, and then they will modify that based on experience and knowledge, and allow you to both succeed and have some times where you fail. And so taking that first step at outlining the roadmap might be your first opportunity to not do a good job, but at least it was a proactive process. So I would encourage that for those of you who are thinking about finding a mentor, that using an IDP process is extremely helpful, and it's relatively standard, although there are many who don't take advantage of that. And it doesn't have to be a complex document. It's really a brainstorming exercise that gives clarity to where you're going, and serves as a common tool for you to kind of sit around a table with your mentor or mentors to discuss how you move forward. What's the roadmap? Yes.
To piggyback off of what you had asked and what you're saying, I think Matt's comment that it sort of takes a village is, I think, resounded with me pretty strongly, especially for residents wanting to try to do research. And our time is often very split between clinical responsibilities and often not given a lot of research time. I'm in a surgical specialty where research time is pretty minimal. So having a mentor that is open to bringing in others that can give you certain scientific expertise, and even sometimes offload some of the burden of learning it all. I mean, it's not like when we were in PhD time where we could sit there and really figure out how to do every single thing at the bench. Now it's sort of trying to kind of more intellectually contribute with others and sort of advance the science that way. I think especially for residents looking at trying to do research, if I can speak to the surgical specialties, is trying to create a team, whether it's a team of mentors or a mentor and sort of scientific kind of advisors. And that's sort of how I've attempted to structure it, where my research is in tracheal transplantation and airway, reconstruction and wound healing. And Dr. Jenin is obviously very clinically focused on that, but doesn't have the same bench sort of accessibility right now. And so we've formulated a group with other folks at the institution to help sort of move this forward. I think for residents, especially, having that team mentality is key.
And just to build upon that, I think that realistic framework is going to depend on your background. So you have an MD, PhD. You went through a period of time of really developing that in-depth operational knowledge. You know how to analyze that critical thinking capacity. Someone who's in residency who has suddenly become enamored with the possibility of research needs to have some additional time put aside to develop some of that operational knowledge and critical thinking capacity, But you're right, they also need to learn how to gather that information from others, how to assess it. Am I being given a story that's not true? As part of a research team, you still need to bring some in-depth knowledge that you contribute to that. So I think that is done by a team, and in building these kinds of programs to allow residents to really pursue research, the level of capacity at that point in time for the given resident, there may need to be some tailored approach in terms of the mentoring strategy for that individual, depending on their prior scientific background.
And then I was just going to say also that there, I think if there are sometimes conflicts or competing interests, right, when you have multiple mentors. So I think one way to kind of avoid that a bit is to do everything kind of in the open and together. And so mentorship committees, I think, are really useful, and they're often required for the career transition grants from the NIH and other places, where you all have to get into a room, and your mentor your primary mentor can't necessarily ignore the advice. I mean, they can ignore, but at least they have to hear it,
Right.
And the advice of other mentors, and I think that's helpful too.
That's a super good point. The role of mentoring committees formalizes that kind of process. It doesn't just leave it to the mentee to organize everything. It's an expectation that the mentors have from any programmatic effort to move research and residency along. Yeah.
I think it's also important when you think about folks, especially folks just starting out in research, or they just got the itch and they're excited to do something. I think a lot of people are more excited than turned off or negative about a question and about something for scientific or medical advancement. Like, we're all, like, to a certain extent, we're all nerds here as physicians and as physician scientists for that matter. So I think, coming forward with that question, but being able to kind of identify your goals and being able to concretely have them even just written down on a piece of paper, flush them out, and then going to someone within your program or someone who you at least maybe have a closer relationship as on a rotation, or someone who you have identified that could be helpful. And more often than not, there are often connections that already exist. And, I think depending on the setting, oftentimes, the medical and science world can be relatively small. So we know people and people know people. So coming forward and asking these types of questions of how can I do X, Y, Z when I know I want to do X, Y, Z. And I think there are options to be able to find these people, but just coming forward and being proactive, identifying it and then asking it, I think is kind of a big first step. And then they're in line, actually getting back to this scenario here, if you're able to identify your goals early on and able to effectively communicate them with a mentor that you're able to identify, then you can kind of preemptively safeguard your own training such that you are going to be able to get a multi-mentored path, and that's what you want out of this. So I think having that initial understanding is helpful.
I also would just want to note too, I like that you use the phrase like safeguarding, because considering what's best for what your research pathway looks like on a biosketch is at the end of the day a very important part of how you decide what you're going to be spending your time on. And there's a little bit of a politics of the allegiance of doing your part in what the PI has contributed in their time to you. But also, if you end up doing something in totally left field, that is not going to help you. If you're going to try to go on further in your career. So it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, we didn't really talk about this. The whole goal of mentoring is in the research realm, is to move you from mentor to independence. And that's a process in and of itself that is built into the communication and aligning expectations, and does allow for you to move in a direction that may additionally interest you when you are ready to do that. But we often advise in the clinical research education program, especially the medical students in the portal program who are doing an MD, MSCR, they may want to do a certain field, but we often will tell them, well, but either you work with that person and we get a complementary mentor, or work in a different field. We say the same thing for fellows, work in a different field with somebody who really has the research capacity, that relevant expertise. And then you can take that knowledge and skills and work in the area that you're interested in. One person comes to mind, we had somebody who was very interested in lung cancer many years ago and wanted to do research, but we really didn't have anyone in the faculty who was a researcher in lung cancer. This was more than 10, 15 years ago. But we had great expertise in hepatocellular carcinoma, and from laboratory research with Scott Friedman all the way through to population science. And so that person focused on that disease, really learned the methodological skills around a different cancer, but then was recruited to be a lung cancer researcher at Memorial. So it's not always you're best going with that relevant expertise. Doesn't have to be the specific disease that you're interested in. If you learn the skills and knowledge, you'll be able to then use that to apply to a particular area of medicine that really is your passion, but you have to learn the methods first. Yes.
I was wondering if anybody had sought out mentorship outside of Sinai, and if they had, how they went about that and the dynamics of that.
I was going to actually say that I don't think you need to limit yourself to someone at your institution, right? I think especially in this day and age, it's very easy to communicate with people who are not physically near you. So, and I think, especially if you have a very specific interest, of course, your primary mentor has to be someone at your institution, or at least somewhere in the city, probably. But you can certainly have other mentors that are maybe have the more specific interest that you do somewhere else, right? And I think that you shouldn't be hesitant about, if you have someone who knows that person, then they can connect you. But I also think like I said, I think just emailing someone and saying, I'm really interested in the work you're doing and I was wanting to get some advice or, talk to you about this. I think most people will be open to that. The worst that happens is they don't respond to your email. But
I think it depends on the situation, right? You're doing a residency and you're thinking 2 years from now, I may want to do a fellowship here. There's somebody at this institution who is doing research I'm really interested in. You want to start to cultivate that relationship. And then thinking about doing research with some input from somebody who's closer by, doing your homework and beginning that. Sometimes you may participate in a training program. And in our field, we have a clinical research training institute for the American Society of Hematology, and people do that training for a week or two and really learning study design and biostatistics. And then they have mentors from a distance that complement their own mentors here. That's another way to do it. And then there may be circumstances where there is a mentor that's just in close proximity that is really working on an area that you have the greatest interest, then there really is no one closer to home, and you establish that. But I think it's very difficult to have a primary mentor who's in Texas that you never met, and you can realistically do a project unless you are already very self-sufficient. You're a guru methodologically in doing secondary data analysis using databases, and there's somebody in Texas who has this fabulous database, and you want to develop a mentoring relationship. I think it really depends on the circumstances, but I'd be interested to see what others think.
I also really like the whole meet lots of people approach. I almost feel like, I don't know what you guys think about this, but like, if you are only ever mentoring people that you have emailed and you haven't sent out more emails than you actually have as mentors, and perhaps you're not meeting up people, because just those intro meetings where you're sort of seeing if there's a fit or if there's just like something else there on the horizon that you haven't thought of, those are just helpful to have in like your long-term career, such that if you circle back to them later, it's like, oh, actually I know you, and it just makes things easier, or you just get to meet new people. So court a lot of people before you settle in on a mentor. And I also think that like I meet my mentors here on Zoom anyways, so I feel like why not just Zoom wherever?
So I'm in complete agreement with that, actually. In 2 stages of my training, I've had mentors which have said, one when I was applying for residency, one when I was applying to fellowship, where I said, oh, I'm just going to do these interviews, for example. And they go, no, 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 like you're going to do all that are like monetarily and time-wise feasible. And I asked why, and the response was, no, the goal here is also to start developing and cultivating yourself as a trainee, but also to meet people.
Right.
And in reality, I've like along that trail, I've met folks who like, and who we maintain contact, and our goal is actually to do studies together. We talk about it and things will happen and other studies come into play and, you know, our time gets lost, but they're still always there for me. And those same people actually have come forward in fellowship applications then as well, because I reunite with them, I unite with them at meetings. And are we on any papers together? No, but we like delight in, you know, the same studies, and we have these type of connections that we can do stuff. I think that's important. So taking advantage of talking to people, of networking will only help you further. I think for residents who are currently kind of trying to find their interests and figure things out, I think taking advantage of the time to sample your interests and however your program structure allows it. So I'm in clinical pathology, for example, like we rotate through microlab, and we get family medicine residents that rotate. We get OBGYN that comes in, you get hemonc that will rotate through transfusion medicine. And this is just a great way to kind of develop your interest, number one. But if there is a research component into it that you don't know if you may want to partake in, it's a great way to meet people and understand the field. And so take advantage of these moments in time where, if they're allowable in your training program, you know, use them.
So I think the hour is coming. I just want to pick up on those 2 points. I love the phrase court many before making a commitment. I think that's very good advice. And I think the notion of, you know, take advantage of these opportunities. And I think your mentors did exactly what one of the best practices is to make you aware and open doors to opportunities. I'll give one short story in my own career. So some of you may know Barry Kohler, who I consider to be a mentor, and he recruited me here to Sinai. Maybe I should thank him, maybe I shouldn't, but he recruited me. And when I first got here, he put me on the review committee for the American Society of Hematology. He was president that year of the American Society of Hematology and invited me to be a reviewer of abstracts. And so I went to the review, and there were all these big wigs in the room, and I got to meet them and I got to talk to them. And then I was invited to do this, and I was on a journal for that. And so he basically quietly opened a door and created opportunity, but it was up to me to take advantage of that, or to prove myself, or to network and get to meet people and build those relationships. And other mentoring relationships came out of that. So I think that's what you described is really, these are some of the soft skills, the hidden roles that really savvy mentors see as part of their construct, is to really make you aware of those other horizons, but it also emphasizes the role you play in making those things happen and taking advantage of it. So I know the hour is up. I want to thank everybody. First of all, our great panelists for their contributions and for everybody's participation. Any further comments or questions from the online group? Anything in the chat?
Well, I'd like to thank you again, Dr. Gabrilove, for a very informative session.
So thank you. Thank you, everybody online, for your attention.
Thank you and good night.